Well, hello again from here inside Newcastle United's training ground, where I've just been speaking to Eddie Howe over my shoulder in the press conference room, and there's only one place to start with this. Eddie Howe has confirmed in my question to him that the £100 million release clause in Bruno Guimaraes' contract expires at the end of June. Yes, there is a hard deadline there. Now, Eddie's take on that was he thinks it's beneficial to the club. He wants to avoid a summer of transfer speculation around a player is key to him as Bruno Guimaraes. Eddie's thought, he wants to keep him here. He called him integral. He wants to build a team around him. The only question we've got to answer and explore in this video is, for £100 million, do you sell Bruno Guimaraes? My answer, yes, I think you do. Now, please don't all switch off at once. At least give me the opportunity to explain myself. I realise that won't be popular with many of you. Now, first of all, before I explain my reasons for why, I've got to go on the record and state how wonderful a player I think Bruno Guimaraes is. That is the reason we're having this conversation about £100 million offers from potentially the likes of Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester City, Arsenal. You don't get that calibre of club wanting to buy you and watching you week in, week out if you're not a very good player. And Bruno, since he's come in, it's about more than the player. And this is perhaps part of the reason as to why I wouldn't sell Bruno Guimaraes. That is because he is unique in terms of his character. I was the first journalist to sit down with him. He signed in the January of 2022. In March, I sat down with him for the Daily Mail and we had half an hour, 40 minutes together, just around the corner here at the training ground. And wow, you know, you got the impression then that he was a special person, not just a special player. Real charisma, real enthusiasm, real intelligence as well. You know, even at that point, we had an interpreter on site with us, but he did half of the interview in pidgin English, which was really charming, really endearing. I walked away from that day just thinking, wow, Newcastle have not just signed a good player, but they've brought in a real gem of a human being. Everything you guys have seen since, everything Eddie Howe has spoken about. I thought that was Bruno coming in over my shoulder there. That would have been timely. The players going out for first team training. Yeah, you know, we all know what he is in terms of that. You know, he's just an atomic bomb of charisma, really. And I think that wears off on other players, and he's certainly a character you want in your team, and those are so hard to come by. So, you know, that would be part of the reason why I'd be reluctant for Newcastle to sell Bruno. I think that is a lot of what forms Eddie Howe's opinion as well, you know, not just what he does on the pitch, but what he brings off the pitch to a dressing room. I know why, you know, can Newcastle go out and replace Bruno Guimaraes? Can they go out and buy a player of equal calibre and quality and everything we've just listed? That would be really, really difficult. And to that end, why would you then set yourself back? Now, I get all of that, and I think I've posed myself a question and said, yes, I would sell Bruno Guimaraes for £100 million, and listed a load of reasons why I wouldn't. No, those are the reasons why I would be reluctant to see Bruno leave the football club. But the key here is, it's the figure, it's the amount, it's the £100 million in an FFP world, and potentially what that could do for the club. I just think it has been set at that value for a reason. Probably slightly above market value. Listen, for all of the wonderful qualities we've just listed there, Bruno Guimaraes isn't a 15 to 20 goal a season midfielder. He's not, you'd say, in the bracket and the level of a Kevin De Bruyne, even a Declan Rice maybe. I don't know, some of you may argue back against that, but I certainly think, you know, while he is excellent, and while he is top class, and while he is a Champions League player, I'm not sure he is a £100 million plus player. Now, you might say, what is these days? You know, if Bruno isn't, who is? Now, that's just my opinion. I would say Bruno Guimaraes' market value, they bought him for what, 36, £40 million. I would say he's doubled it in that time. I'd say now he's perhaps an £80 million player. Now, £100 million, I think, as I touched on there earlier, it's been set at that level for a reason, just to perhaps tempt somebody in at a price that would make sense to the club. And for me, if Newcastle were able to get £100 million, I just think the scope with what they could do with that money for a player who turns 27 in November. And as I said, you know, we're forgetting that Bruno's form, you know, it hasn't always been, he's in a good run at the moment. Undoubtedly, you know, the last 5 or 6 weeks we've seen the very best of him and how transformative he's been in certain games. But I don't know, I'm arguing with myself here to a degree, but that hasn't always been there. There's been periods when I know he's been carrying an ankle problem at different times, but there have been periods where Bruno's form hasn't been that of a, never mind £100 million player, hasn't been that of an £80 million player. So I just think given his age, you are losing so much, I know you are, but I do think if £100 million offer came in and the player showed a willingness to go, we haven't even spoken about that. All of our information is that Bruno is perfectly happy here. If £100 million offer came in, I do think there'll be a conversation to be had, and I might just be minded if anyone was asking my opinion, not that they would. I think it might just make too much sense for the club to sit down and potentially sell, especially if, I'm making that assumption on it coupled with the player wanting to go. Now, if an offer came in and Bruno said he didn't want to go, well, it's a no-brainer. I think then he's got to stay. I think those two things have got to exist together. There's got to be the interest, there's got to be the offer at the price Newcastle want, and there's got to be an indication that Bruno would want to go. Now, would he want to go? I've said in recent videos, so before any of you come back and say I'm contradicting myself, all of my information, I've certainly got no information that Bruno is unhappy at Newcastle, but things about contracts and release clauses and interest have been leaked by certain parties around the player, and they've been leaked for a reason, whether they think it's just beneficial for Guimaraes to have that noise around him, doesn't do any harm, or whether there's actually a means to an end and that information is out there to try and, to garner that interest, to try and create a market, to try and make the likes of Arsenal, City and PSG think, well, if they're in for him, we best be in for him too. We don't know. Now, I also said in the recent video that you have to build around the likes of elite players such as Isaac, Guimaraes and Anthony Gordon was the other one I put in that bracket. And, I stand by that in an ideal world, perhaps. And again, this isn't a definite yes or no. This is why I've rambled on for 7 minutes now. And again, I'm in an argument with myself in many ways. If the alternative was, Bruno stayed, well, wonderful. He's a brilliant player. Why not build next year as Eddie wants, around Bruno, around Isaac, around Anthony Gordon? I've already said that myself on these videos. So, but maybe it would just be the case that the people above him, the people who inserted that contract clause in the first place and agreed to it, they might just take a different view. Below the line, please give your thoughts. I think there are, it's a fascinating debate on this one. Newcastle would, if they were to get £100 million, they would have to then be smart enough to invest it smarter than they did last summer, not to do down the players of last summer, but the four of them could all be wonderful for Newcastle down the line. But certainly last summer's recruitment for me, I'm not going to go over all ground here, I don't think it was good enough in the isolation of what they needed going into this season. I think I've been proven right on that. So if they were to get a big amount of money and that then allowed them to spend, 100, 200 million pounds in this window, which obviously it would, they would have to get it right. They'd have to back themselves to revert to finding the likes of a Bruno, the likes of an Isaac, the likes of a Botman, being smart enough to get England internationals like Nick Pope and Kieran Trippier in. So, yeah, I think we've got a little way to go on this one, but, well, no, we haven't. We've got until June the 30th, or have we? Now, just because the contract release clause expires on June the 30th, does that mean, and Eddie, in response to my question there, Eddie said he thinks it's a smart move by the club, it's well structured for a reason, he wants to avoid a summer of transfer speculation, and I get that. Now, would it mean it goes away after June the 30th if no transfers happen by then? Well, not necessarily. I think there's another side to this argument whereby you could say it actually removes the protection of the release clause, and I think the release clause is smart in its value, being slightly above, market rate for me, yet perhaps just low enough to tempt somebody in. Now, if that goes, what's to stop PSG, City, Arsenal, whoever, coming back and saying, no, we're offering you £80 million on July the 1st, and our information is the player wants to go. Now, that then could potentially present a little bit of a problem for Newcastle. So yeah, while we're looking at as June the 30th, that hard deadline, as I used, has been, that's the end of it all. It might not be yet, this is football, and we might just have to strap ourselves in for a whole summer of this. But anyway, guys, before I tell you what else Eddie said this morning and give a little look ahead to the game tomorrow, leave your thoughts below the line. Bruno Guimaraes, £100 million, stay or go. What do you do? Now, what else did he say this morning on fitness? Quickly rattle through this. It's nice not to lead a video on injury news, isn't it? Callum Wilson, he came through Wednesday night okay. He's trained, should be okay for tomorrow against Sheffield United. Tino Livramento injured his ankle, or suffered a slight reaction to his ankle against Spurs, wasn't fit enough to come on Wednesday down at Palace, but Eddie thinks after he trains today, he should sound positive on that, he should be okay. That injured quartet we talk about, Kieran Trippier, he won't be back tomorrow, the calf problem lingers, Eddie says he hopes that soon. Nick Pope and Joe Linton, they do still sound a couple of weeks away. Miguel Almiron is the one who should be back for next week, I think it is. We're down, I'm losing track now. Is it Brighton? Is it Burnley? I don't know, Burnley. He should be back for the game there. So he's the one, I think, out of that quartet who is perhaps the closest. But Newcastle will go again with what they've got against Sheffield United tomorrow. And there's got to be a response, because I touched on this on Wednesday night. You know, I thought Eddie's post-match reaction, he entered new territory. He wasn't quite, in the realms of Steve Bruce. That was absolutely shit, as he once did. Funny enough, I think it was against the game, against Sheffield United, when he used that phrase with us rather charmingly. No, Eddie used a quill as opposed to a toilet brush to hammer home his point. But he did it, he did it eloquently. He did it in a way that I think wouldn't rile players, but nonetheless, he put Wednesday back on the players. He said it wasn't about systems, it was about their application of it. And in my post-match video, I noticed a few people responded saying, why are you trying to extrapolate a positive from that? Well, it wasn't. The headline had the word positive in, but if you actually listened and read around it and read between the lines, what I was saying was actually negative in that Wednesday for me, shone a light on players who perhaps do need to be improved upon if the club are going to go to where they want to go. And I really do stand by that. And, this could have been dangerous if Newcastle had bounced through at the end of the season and we'd all left thinking, actually, this squad is good, this squad is okay, get the injuries back. They'll be fine with the players they've got. Had one or two or three. No, I think they've got to admit now that there's certain areas of the team need, mass overhaul is probably the wrong word, but I think there's got to be more than minor surgery this summer. I think it's the time, if they can, to do a little bit more. And on that subject, Eddie has sort of sounded, and this sort of subject is going to run and run. He said that they can't sign elite ready-made players this summer. He again has sounded caution with regards FFP restrictions, but goodness, we've been there before. It's only April. Let's talk about that all of May and all of June and all of July and into August. I'm not going to get too bogged down with that just yet. Quick little word as well, two little newsy items to bring you. Story I broke exclusively yesterday. Dougie Freeman is on the shortlist now as the sporting director search enters its final stages. We expect a resolution on that probably going into the summer window. But yeah, Dougie Freeman, Crystal Palace, I've heard a lot of good things about him. He brought in Elise, Anderson, Eze, who else? Wharton, the guy Wharton, who Newcastle watched, was very good the other night. They brought in, he's done a really good job there. And, while there are other candidates and the process is far from finished and, they're not offering anyone the role just yet, I think Dougie Freeman does make a lot of sense. So we'll have to see how that one unfolds. And also pre-season, I brought you the news last week in my NUFC notebook column that Japan was a possibility. They'd sourced options over there. There's reports in the Japanese press this morning that Newcastle are going to play 2 games there in July, as yet unconfirmed by the club. So it's sayonara for now from me. I'll be back after the game against Sheffield United tomorrow. I'll see you then, guys. Again, like, comment, subscribe, all the rest of it. And thank you again for watching. Give you a quick little 360 of this place. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.